Greetings. I'm here with Misha Graboi, who is CFO of Chia Network, and we're discussing some takeaways from 2022 as well as his thoughts on 2023. Misha, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Could you introduce Chia Network to us, please?
Sure. So Chia Network was invented a few years ago by a gentleman named Bram Cohen, who was the founder of BitTorrent and has some expertise, I would say, in distributed network engineering. And essentially, he looked at some of the blockchain technologies that were out there and said, I think that we can do better. We can provide the security that is inherent in Bitcoin, the functionality that is inherent in smart contracting type languages and smart contracting platforms at a fraction of the energy use that we see today. And so he created Chia Network, which is a sustainable, secure, and compliant blockchain that we believe delivers on those promises.
Could you touch on some of the takeaways that you have from 2022? Obviously, this was a pretty interesting year in your space. But
that is one way to put it. Yes.
Yeah. But I think there's also now an emphasis on the value that companies like yours are bringing to the industry now that it's not just extremely driven by buzz and hype, and people are looking for value and meaning and actual tangible value. So there's a sense that companies that are bringing something new and bringing new utility to this segment, and in whatever area that is, it's valuable and something that people actually want to know about. So what are some of the takeaways looking back on this year?
So in regards to the blockchain space that we're in and the technology surrounding that, I would say the message is that the casino itself may be closed. One of the saddest things that I think has occurred in this sector is that, what started out as an extremely promising set of technologies to provide essentially transactional and custodial infrastructure for many people in the world who either overpay for it or who don't have access to it at all, due to a variety of different technical and organizational reasons, ultimately sort of devolved into kind of a gigantic casino where everybody was playing. And it looks like perhaps maybe a reconstruction somewhat of the financial sector circa 2008, in terms of everyone being over levered, or not everyone, but a number of participants being over levered, having hypothecated assets to dubious counterparties and other, sorts of problems. But the truth is that, part of the reason that I entered this space and why Chia was my chosen destination was that we wanted to utilize that blockchain technology to do real things in the world. And so, we can give, a few examples. We are working with AIDA, the World Bank, and the government of Singapore in the global carbon market to provide the infrastructure, the technological infrastructure that underlies the Climate Action Data Trust, which is essentially a kind of a source of truth for information on the creation of global carbon credits. We're also working with the IFC, Cultivo, and others to then try to standardize some of those credits and essentially improve market liquidity and improve access to the carbon credit market for a number of projects that are providing offsets and sequestration and that kind of thing. And so, for us, the mission has always been about trying to deploy real applications, in addition to enabling independent developers and others do the things that they want to with our open source technology.
I love that. And I think that that's such a huge point to make about 2022. It's the casino is closed, right? So now
we can hope. Let's see.
If you think back like decades ago, Wall Street, Charlie Sheen, Michael Douglas, this whole idea, it's not about greed is good, right?
Right.
But it's actually that functionality is good. Functionality is what we want. So you're actually bringing value. You're cleaning it up. You're helping clean up the space, but you're also helping it function better and focus on performance that's sustainable and actually delivers something that the system actually can use in the long term. So I think that
is certainly the objective.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's fantastic. You have Singapore, and you're collaborating, you're working with them, you're working on this idea of delivering global solutions, which is great. So I guess tying into that, what do you see as priorities going into 2023 for yourself, for partners? What is your outlook on the action items and the things to remember going into next year?
So, in again, sort of in the blockchain space, I think our mission is simply to continue to execute as best we can. There are many relevant applications for what we're doing, from providing access for to custody solutions and other things for people, to enabling process integrity. And what I mean by that is the ability to, for example, prove that a database was in a particular condition at a particular point, which is very important for certain types of compliance tests and other things like that, as well as a lot of the traditional uses we think about for blockchains, such as transactions, payments, possibly securities issuance, and other things like that. I think going forward, from a CFO perspective, it feels a little bit like, everybody woke up in the last 2 weeks to the importance of internal controls and things like that. The fact is that since I joined the firm about 18 months ago, it's been my job to create an internal infrastructure that both scales with the organization. I mean, when I joined, I think we're about 18 people. We're about 75 people now. And so the complexity of the business has increased significantly. At the same time, the industry that we're in is changing very rapidly. So it needs to be both structured enough to provide the adequate level of internal controls, but also flexible enough to adapt to both the changing regulatory environment, which is almost a certainty now, as well as just changes in the industry, changes in the environment, changes in the way we may work with our counterparties and other people.
And you mentioned my favorite topic, transactions, blockchain. Okay. 2023 B2B payments. There are lots of potential applications. What do you foresee rolling out next year? What do you see businesses, your partners, thinking about for 2023 in reference to those applications?
So I think a lot of the early stuff that we are looking at now actually centers around things like process transparency and things like that. So you have, for example, in many parts of the world, you have markets for things like agricultural receipts and things like that, where people essentially bring in, a certain amount of agricultural goods and are issued bearer securities effectively that they can then get loans against and things like that. There's a great desire among many parties to improve transparency in that space, for example. So, I think certainly, payments in using cryptocurrency technologies are relatively straightforward, and I think those will continue to be adopted. But I think one area where I think certain crypto technologies really shine is the ability to actually improve transparency along an entire value chain and really help out there.
That's great. That's great. And I think I think transparency is going to be a really defining issue for businesses, for companies like yours, and it's
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, one of the sad ironies about what's happened over the past few weeks in the sector is that this was exactly the kind of thing that blockchains were actually created to prevent. The idea is that rather than being beholden, rather than being forced to trust a custodial intermediary or a transactional intermediary, the idea behind blockchain technology is that you actually maintain control of your assets at all times, right up until the point where you mutually agree with another party to trade them. And, that is, I think, a critical element. And what happened instead was that, people began to use centralized exchanges because they were easy, and a number of exchanges I think are very, very solid in doing the things that they need to do. But ultimately, they gave up control of their assets and they trusted a third party custodian. And in certain cases, that turned out to be very, very negative. And I think that's, the unfortunate irony of what's happened.
Yeah, because it's a tool, right? It's a tool.
Sure.
That can be used, and it can be used to actually create change and fix a lot of these issues that need fixing, or it can also be exploited like anything else. No different than a credit card or a bank. So
The cryptocurrency did not invent over leverage. Cryptocurrency did not,
yeah.
invent bad risk management. Cryptocurrency did not invent bad internal controls.
Yeah, I guess,
Sure.
and I guess, sorry to cut you off, to kind of wind down. So for 2023, could you pick? I mean, we already talked about priorities, but would you pick something, that one or two components that you feel should be priorities for businesses who are thinking about blockchain for B2B payments, thinking about transforming their B2B payments? What are some things that they should think about if they're a CFO considering digital transformation? What are some things that they should actually think about? We talked about visibility, transparency. What's something that you saw
Sure.
from last year that could actually help them as they're evaluating their choices and thinking about next year?
Well, I mean, I certainly think that you have to ask the question, first of all, does the choice that you're making fit with your corporate values? So does it provide, not only an easy path to make payments, but does it also, is it also compatible with things like your environmental, your views on the environment and other things? Or, is it essentially contributing to solutions or contributing to problems? Another thing I think that every CEO has to look at is how they integrate into the space that how they integrate into their own internal processes and things like that. So, it can be complex to go from, essentially a, largely, I want to say cash oriented business, but things like checks and even ACH payments and things like that to integrating cryptocurrency and stuff like that. And so I think that many CEOs will be spending a lot of time thinking about the best way to integrate that into existing processes, or whether they need to redesign and come out with new processes internally.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. And that's great. Thank you very much, Misha.
Great. Thank you very much, Carla. It's very nice to meet you.